When most people think of Victorian England, they picture elegant ladies in corsets, gentlemen in top hats, grand manor houses, and perhaps a spot of tea. Maybe you've seen the romanticised versions in period dramas. All carriages, ballrooms, and upper-class sophistication. Nothing could be further from the truth for most people. Victorian England was filthy, disease-ridden, and absolutely lethal. Let's find out now why you probably wouldn't survive even a single day in this supposedly civilized era, and why the odds were stacked against you from the moment you arrived. Let's suppose you suddenly found yourself transported to Victorian England. Say, London in the 1850s. Here's your first problem: the odds. You'd most likely be poor. Very poor. About 1/3 of the entire population lived in desperate poverty, crammed into slums that modern health inspectors would condemn in minutes. The wealth gap was staggering. While the rich got richer during the Industrial Revolution, the working class got cholera. If you were lucky enough to be middle or upper class, you might have a fighting chance. But statistically, you'd be part of the masses. And if you were poor in Victorian England, you were more likely to be dead before 25 than sitting comfortably anywhere near a drawing room. The average life expectancy in the industrial cities was shockingly low. In some working-class districts of Manchester, men died on average at just 17. You'd barely make it to adulthood. So no, you wouldn't be attending balls at grand estates. You'd be living 4 to a bed in a disease-infested slum, with raw sewage running in the streets. Now, let's suppose you made it to London. Take a deep breath. Actually, don't. The air in Victorian cities would literally kill you. London was shrouded in thick, poisonous smog created by thousands of coal fires burning simultaneously. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was deadly. The Great Smog events would kill thousands of people in a matter of days from respiratory failure. The River Thames had effectively become London's largest open sewer. In the summer of 1858, the stench became so unbearable that Parliament had to close because MPs couldn't stand the smell of raw sewage wafting through the windows. They called it the Great Stink. But it wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a death sentence. Fecal matter from over 2 million people flowed directly into the same river that supplied drinking water to much of the city. And the pollution wasn't just in the air and water. Inside the factories where you'd likely be forced to work, coal dust was so thick you couldn't see across the room. Workers developed black lung, tuberculosis, and chronic respiratory diseases. Children who worked in these conditions from age 5 often didn't live to see 30. Speaking of work, let's talk about your new career. If you were a child, and remember children made up about 50% of the factory workforce, your workday would start at 6 in the morning and end at 8 at night. That's 14 hours. 6 days a week. No breaks except for a brief meal period where you'd eat in the same dust-filled room where you worked. And what kind of work? The most dangerous jobs imaginable. Children as young as 5 were sent into coal mines because their small bodies could fit into narrow tunnels. They'd be strapped to carts filled with coal and forced to drag them through the darkness on their hands and knees for 12 to 18 hours. Many developed permanent spinal deformities. In textile factories, children worked as scavengers, crawling under operating machinery to pick up loose cotton. If they fell asleep, which happened constantly because they were exhausted children, they'd be scalped, crushed, or killed by the machines. Oh, and if you made a mistake, arrived late, or fell asleep on the job, you'd be beaten, fined, sometimes both. Factory bosses kept children deliberately underfed so they'd remain small enough to fit into the machinery. And this was documented practice until the Factory Acts started providing minimal protections. And even those were rarely enforced. But even if you survived the factories, disease was coming for you. Victorian England was a perfect breeding ground for epidemics. Cholera killed quickly, sometimes within hours. The disease caused such violent diarrhea that victims would literally dehydrate to death, while their skin turned blue. Between 1832 and 1866, 4 major cholera epidemics swept through Britain, killing over 60,000 people in 1848 alone. That's 600 deaths in a single week during the worst outbreak. Typhoid fever was everywhere. It killed both rich and poor. Even Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband, died from it. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, scarlet fever, they were just part of life. Scarlet fever alone killed 10,000 children per year in England and Wales. 10,000 children. Every single year. There was no understanding of germ theory. So, doctors prescribed treatments like bloodletting with leeches, drinking mercury, or rubbing turpentine on your chest. These cures often killed patients faster than the diseases themselves. If you cut your finger and it got infected, you could easily die from sepsis. A simple childbirth could be fatal. In 1420s Florence, 1 in 5 women died during labour. And conditions weren't much better in Victorian England. And here's the thing that would absolutely finish you. You have no immunity. Modern people have been vaccinated against diseases that routinely killed Victorians. You'd be walking through a minefield of pathogens your body has never encountered. Now, suppose you were unlucky enough to be a woman in Victorian England. Your legal status was barely above property. Once you married, and you were expected to marry, you essentially ceased to exist as an independent person. Your husband owned everything: your money, your property, even your children. You couldn't vote, couldn't own property in your own name, and had virtually no legal rights. If you were poor, you'd work brutal hours in factories, mines, or as a domestic servant, all while managing household duties, childcare, and possibly multiple pregnancies. Remember, there was no birth control, no pain relief for childbirth, and no understanding of hygiene. Women gave birth in filthy conditions, attended by midwives who didn't wash their hands between patients. Maternal mortality was staggeringly high. And if you survived childbirth, you'd likely watch several of your children die. It wasn't uncommon for a woman to give birth to 10 children and see only half of them reach adulthood. The grief was universal and constant. Let's suppose things got really bad. Maybe you lost your job, maybe your husband died. There was one place left to go: the workhouse. And this is where Victorian England showed its true cruelty. Workhouses were deliberately designed to be worse than the worst conditions on the outside. The idea was to make poverty so humiliating, so punishing, that only the truly desperate would ask for help. And if you entered a workhouse, your family was immediately torn apart. Husbands were separated from wives, children over 7 were taken from their mothers. You'd never live together as a family again, unless you left. You'd be given a uniform, often deliberately humiliating, and fed a starvation diet of watery gruel and occasionally some bread. The most infamous scandal involved the Andover Workhouse in 1845, where inspectors found inmates fighting over rotting bones they were supposed to be grinding into fertilizer. The inmates were so starved, they were sucking the marrow from the bones and eating the scraps of putrid meat still clinging to them. By 1839, almost half of all workhouse inmates were children. 43,000 children living in institutions designed to punish their parents for being poor. Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist specifically to expose the brutality of the workhouse system, and the famous line, "Please sir, I want some more," was based on the actual legal prohibition against giving workhouse inmates second helpings of food. But let's say you somehow avoided all of that. Perhaps you were one of the lucky few who was actually wealthy. Surely the rich were safe, right? Wrong. The wealthy ate their meals off beautiful glazed pottery. The only problem? The glaze was made from lead oxide. When acidic foods like vinegar or fruit were served on these plates, the lead would leach into the food. Lead poisoning builds up in the body over time, causing headaches, abdominal pain, seizures, and eventually death. Victorian skeletons from wealthy urban cemeteries show lead levels well above what we'd consider safe today. Even bread, the staple food, could kill you. Rye used to make bread was often infected with a fungus called ergot, which caused a condition called St. Anthony's fire. Symptoms included hallucinations, muscle cramps, burning sensations, and eventually, gangrene. Your fingers, toes, hands, and feet could literally turn black and fall off. Some historians believe ergot poisoning caused the dancing epidemics, where groups of people would dance uncontrollably in the streets until they collapsed from exhaustion or died. So even if you had money, even if you avoided the slums and the factories and the workhouses, Victorian England had plenty of ways to kill you. The Victorian era is often romanticised as a time of progress, elegance, and civilization. And yes, there were great advances: railways, telegraphs, engineering marvels. But for the vast majority of people, Victorian England was a nightmare of poverty, disease, exploitation, and early death. You'd be breathing poisoned air, drinking contaminated water, working 14-hour days from childhood, watching your family members die from preventable diseases. And if you fell on hard times, you'd end up in a workhouse that was designed to make you wish you were dead. The average life expectancy in working-class districts was often under 25 years. That means most people watching this wouldn't have survived to their current age. So no, you wouldn't last 24 hours in Victorian England. You'd be lucky to last 24 years. Thank you for watching this episode of Victorian Madness. Please subscribe if you enjoy these videos, and I'll see you next week for another journey into history's darkest corners. Have a great week. Cheers!